did you know there has been a major win for free speech in the United Kingdom?
I did not.
This is good news, isn't it?
What's going on?
I know. That's unusual. Have a white pill. And not just an abstract thing either, right? This is directly tied to our interests as people who make jokes on the internet. A UK court, 2 judges, have in fact said that we have a natural right to offend. That's good news.
That's great.
So, yeah.
When I initially did my map to show us writing to MPs, that's what I wanted it to be the titles. We have a right to offend and a right not to offend.
Yes, and we actually can start making a legal case about this now, which is wonderful. So this comes from 2 judges after a particular. Well, I'll get into the details of the investigation in a minute, but Lord Justice Bean and Mr. Justice Warby ruled that free speech encompasses the right to offend and indeed abuse another. Freedom only to speak inoffensively is not worth having. This is a very correct and principled position. I'm very happy with it. They said it would be serious interference with the right of free speech if those wishing to express their own views could be silenced or threatened with proceedings for harassment based on subjective claims by individuals that felt offended or insulted. We're going to get to how that is exactly what the UK law is at the moment in a bit. The judgment could have far-reaching implications for officers seeking to bring charges over people's opinions, a move that has been seen them branded the thought police by campaigners over free speech. That's us. Now, the reason that I brought up that I'm going to be doing a book club on the rule of law is because this is directly tied to what's happening now. Because it turns out that all of our constitutionalism and all of our the things that we consider important, like habeas corpus, the Bill of Rights, all of this, a lot of these came out of legal actions and decisions that were made by judges to interpret the law and essentially set precedent, because common law is evolutionary, it's incremental, it's not revolutionary, it's not dictated from an abstract set of principles and applied to society. And honestly, that's why it's better than the continental canon system. But it's also the reason that this is so important, because this can be the turning point in the battle of free speech. Now we have a legal judgment that is in favour on our side. We can now campaign for that and hopefully get the law changed, which is what happened in previous eras. So fingers crossed we can make something happen with this. But anyway, so this was the result of a mother of 2 called Kate Scottow, 40, from Hitchin in Hertfordshire, who was found guilty in February under an obscure part of the Communications Act 2003 following Twitter exchanges with a trans woman who reported her to police when Miss Scottow called her a racist and a pig in a wig and referred to her as a man. I'm not trying to laugh, but since the judge says it's okay for me to laugh... Excuse me, police! Someone on the Twitter's calling me a pig in a wig! Honestly, is that where we are? That's where we are,
That's
right?
where we have been for at least, 17 years now?
About that, yeah. Someone call me a man on Twitter, do something. Just, God, it's so pathetic. Right? This person is Stephanie Hayden, a lawyer from Wembley. Now, this is important because obviously being a lawyer makes her very litigious. A lawyer from Wembley obtained a gender recognition certificate in 2017 that recognises her as a woman in law and doubtless protects her from things like male pattern baldness and stuff like this. You know, that's another joke that I'm making because I think I'm legally immune. But anyway, Miss Hayden reported Miss Scottow to the police in December 2018, and Miss Scottow was subsequently arrested, kept in police custody for 11 hours away from her 20-month-old son, who is still being breastfed, and also has a daughter who is on the autistic spectrum and was 10 at the time of the arrest. So, I mean, that's pretty heavy-handed for Twitter exchanges. Ridiculous, obviously, totally against what I would consider the natural rights of Englishmen, but that's only because I'm one of those old fuddy-duddy constitutionalists who cares about these things. But anyway, so in the initial court case, after this was brought, Miss Scottow was found guilty of contravening the Communications Act 2003, Section 127 2C, which is exactly the part that we've been complaining about. Frankly, Section 127 1 and 2 are the main problems. But anyway, by District Judge Margaret Dodds, who said Miss Scottow broke the rule to be kind to each other and not call her names. Well, Margaret Dodds, where was that written? Where did I agree that I would be kind to people and not call them names? am I obliged to do that? It'd be nice if I'm kind. I am kind to some people, but there are some people who are, and I'm going to put this bluntly, tremendous assholes that I don't feel inclined to be kind towards, and I feel that I should be able to call names. Again, just as my right as an Englishman. But
an absurd standard as well. But legally, we're going to make people be kind to each other.
Yeah. I mean, how are you going to enforce it? How do you measure it?
By arresting anyone you deem to be unkind, what we've been doing for at least a decade.
But how do I know if I'm being kind or not? Like, I don't think that handouts are a kind thing to do. I actually think they're a cruel thing to do because they make someone dependent, which is why you see signs at, like, parks saying, don't feed the animals. They become dependent on the handouts, you know? And so it's like, well, if you're not allowing them to, like, you know, giving them the incentive to go and actually create their own prosperity, then, yeah, you make things dependent. Anyone becomes dependent, and anything becomes dependent when you just give them free handouts. It's just how life works.
Very basic fiscal conservatism there, or fiscal
liberalism. Exactly. It's not a controversial thing to say, but I do think that it's actually immoral to do that. And if you're going to do that, you've better have a good reason for doing it, and not just have it as just blanket policy like we do now. But anyway, yeah, so the definition of kindness is subjective, and...
Well, it's not even subjective. It's not desirable to enforce kindness on society.
I completely agree. Or compassion, or any of these other things. These, I mean,
who wants to live in a world of pure kindness?
Well, yeah, obviously, but not even that. Any of these things that are done artificially are not sincere, and therefore not really the thing that you're trying to enforce. And so now you've just got the facade of, you know, this is the kind thing to do, and then you're likely going to have someone behind that who's deeply resentful and actually raging about the fact they have to do this. So, very unhealthy particular situation to get into. But anyway, so this came after a Freedom of Information request by the Telegraph, found that police in England and Wales had recorded 120,000 non-crime hate incidents in the past 5 years, which is 66 a day, right? Now, if you look into these non-crime hate incidents, they are exactly as they sound. They're things that hate incidents, whatever that's supposed to mean, presumably something based on gender or ethnicity or whatever, religion, and the police will actively encourage you. You can see their graphics and the website say this. Even if it's not a crime, call us up and tell us anyway. It's like, why?
The police spend money to promote that you should do this.
Yes. My money to promote that you should do this. So why are you dobbing in your neighbours for not committing a crime? For being, but essentially what it is going to do, well, put them on a database of people who have said things.
So my favourite one is the police presented this in all seriousness in a report, I'll have to find it, of examples of these sort of things. And one of them was a man complained to the police because when he went to a supermarket, he was handed a carrier bag in a homophobic way. It's like, right, okay, this deserves a police...
I mean, it's not a crime.
This is police time that we've got to waste on.
But it is a hate incident, so it's important we record it.
I actually had some luck. I ran into a couple of policemen in Canterbury once who had some... who dealt with this a lot. I asked them, because they were quite pro that we should record these things. I asked them, well, what's the point? And they said, we want to measure bigotry within communities. It's like, right, social engineering then.
Yeah. How's that your business?
How do you even define these things? So I asked them, we had, I think it was Britain's first, who came to our campus to complain about a mosque being built there, because Canterbury's a Christian myth.
Well, it's the
city.
Seat of the Archbishop.
Yeah, it's a bit of a holy site, let's say.
Yeah.
So
it literally is a holy site. People used to pilgrimage there.
Yeah. So these guys, and you can question their motives all you want, but they were upset about this mosque being built and being there, and okay. And this was recorded. I asked them, did you record that as a hate crime incident? And they said, well, yeah, it was legal, so they're not committing a crime, but it was a hate crime incident. And they recorded it as a sign of bigotry in Canterbury. Yeah,
you can see how this has to end, right? But anyway, this comes on the heels of many other examples of this happening. The Telegraph list a bunch of them, so I don't have to go and find them myself, which is useful. But Harry Miller, which is the guy who retweeted a limerick about transgenderism.
I don't think did he just like it?
I think he might have liked it, yeah. But either way, that somehow came to the police's attention, and he was contacted by the Humberside Police to, quote, check his thinking. As if I think these people are, frankly, well-informed enough to know how to check someone's thinking, like that is even a desirable thing to do. Incredibly Orwellian, this situation that we found ourselves in. Another example was David Starkey, who was being interviewed by Darren Grimes, who said that slavery wasn't genocide because, quote, so many damn blacks survived. That's not what he was saying. It was so many Dan Blacks complaining, but
Yeah, you have to rip the context there as well for it to sound bad.
Yeah, but and it's not just that; it's the way he's presenting it in sort of old schoolmaster way.
This was sort of a joke. That wording on its own, of course, in a dry courtroom, is something completely different to him joking.
Yeah, he's not. It would be the same thing. Same thing as me saying, "Oh, I've lost my damn car keys." You know, he's not. I'm not actually condemning my car keys. I'm condemning the fact that this is an issue in front of my face. It's not a judgment about the thing that is the issue. But it doesn't matter either way. He was investigated by the Met, but thankfully that was dropped. And so we find ourselves in a position where we've got the judges saying very, very clearly that Section 127 is just not fit for purpose. Mr. Justice Warby said, "It is clear in my judgment that these provisions were not intended by Parliament to criminalise forms of expression, the content of which is no worse than an annoying or inconvenient in nature." And the judgment states, "The prosecution under Section 127C for online speech is plainly an interference by the state with the defendant's convention right to freedom of expression," talking about the UN Convention on Human Rights. So, I mean, that's true. Our laws at the moment, as confirmed by a judge in the UK, infringe on our right to freedom of expression as set down in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
This is an English judge in the High Court of Appeals, correct? Because you would have thought the judge presiding over the Count Dankula case in Scotland would have been able to plainly see this.
I would have thought so too.
But complete ignorance. And his standard was that not only was it fit for purpose, but Mr. Dankula is not a real name, obviously, but his context wasn't even relevant.
Yeah,
was the ruling.
Yep, we decide if context is relevant. Is the ruling? I don't know how things are in Scotland, but that was the Scottish legal view, I suppose. And they do have Scots law up there, so maybe it's different to English law. I would have to check. But basically, yeah, anyone who doesn't know the history of this will quickly go through it. So Labour's 2003 Communication Act, which is quite easy to find.
Bit of tidbit. Every single member of the Conservative Party voted against this.
Right. Well, shame they didn't have a majority, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
And since they have a majority,
get rid of it now.
I was going to say, since they have a majority now and a very strong one, they should get rid of it. Boris, get on it. But anyway, this was based on the improper use of a public electronic communications network. A person is guilty of an offence if they send by means of this communications network a message or other matter that is grossly offensive, or of an indecent, obscene, or menacing character, or because any such messages or matter could be sent. And 2 is a person is guilty of an offence if for the purpose of causing annoyance, inconvenience, or needless anxiety to another, he sends a message by this network. Now, that contravenes our human rights, as the judgment has shown, and A, should we be criminalising offence? I don't think we should. I think that's obviously against free speech. And B, causing annoyance? Really? So trolling by this would be illegal?
This was originally to deal with people prank calling people.
Well, I was going to get to that.
I just wanted to mention, Boris Johnson voted against this. I've got the list in front of me. And
okay.
Most of them are still sitting as well. So
Boris.
They have absolutely no excuse not to then get rid of this.
We're waiting. Any time. But yeah, this was an evolution of the superseded Section 43 of the Telecommunications Act, which is the next one we get up. There is a key difference here. And this is because the Telecommunications Act, because it was written in 1984, and it was an inheritance of, again, something that was written in the 40s, I believe, when telephones were first invented, it was to prevent these sort of direct calls.
There is actually... going back further on this, so the problem is, of course, the idea of gross offence. Mm-hmm. So that it being grossly offensive means nothing. Why criminalising offence? I traced this and I managed to get back to the 1901 Post Office Act in Victorian times, in which they criminalised putting grossly offensive messages on your postal packets. Right. So you couldn't write on the top, or draw pornography or something.
But the point is, what you're not doing is broadcasting. What you are
it's
doing
a Victorian standard.
Yes, A, it's a Victorian standard, but B, you're sending a direct message from one person to another person with the intent that only the other person sees it, right? So the internet through the 2003 Communications Act is being treated like a telephone, but that's not what it's like. It's actually like a public broadcasting system, like a television. So if you're going to apply standards and rules to it, then for gross indecency, whatever it is, and maybe you want to have like watersheds or something, I don't know, but the point is, you should treat it like a broadcasting system, because that's what it is. because none of these things are exclusively for the people who have seen them and complained about them. They're on the internet. They're public. Everyone can see them. So it's much more like a broadcasting
You also
system.
choose to tune in. Like, your
Yes.
telephone rings without you deciding whether or not you want it to.
And you don't know what you're going to get on the other end of it. So you can understand, like, heavy breathing calls or something. Maybe there should be some sort of criminal action there if you're going to continually harass someone like that. But if it's someone online that you don't like, block them. Don't look at it. Go on a different platform. I don't know. You've got
You
a
choose to
million
engage.
options. Yeah. So, but what's the Law Commission re-proposals there?
So I just wanted to mention as well, this isn't the only law that the Labour Party passed that was like this. In 2005, they also they updated the Public Order Act so that if you were insulting someone, that was also a crime. And thankfully, at the time, the culture was that celebrities would come out and say this is nonsense. There was a young boy who called a police officer's horse gay, and he was charged with a crime. There are exactly the same circumstances as Section 127, but the internet just wasn't around. And it's
Turns out the horse was bi.
I didn't ask first. But this is a recurring issue. But what's interesting is the fact that, of course, the culture's changed to the point now that how many celebrities came out in favour of Count Acula?
None.
Maybe 2 comedians wrote a thing and said a thing, which, great on them, but that's a massive decline in culture.
Ricky Gervais gave a kind of half-hearted, it was just a joke. David Baddiel was actually the strongest one on
Yeah.
it. Being, I'm Jewish and I thought that was hilarious, so it's like, okay, well, I mean, it was.
But what a decline in the culture that is. Anyway,
It is.
So I wanted to mention this is all good, and we're all very happy about it. But the Law Commission have been doing some proposals. We covered it previously, where they wanted to propose criminalising the Charlie Hebdo cartoons, which crazy. And they've rewritten some of them, and this chap here from the Adam Smith Institute has done a long thread about this issue. And so he's mentioning what their re-proposals are. And the re-proposals are that if you want to send out a message and you have an audience in mind and you want to commit harm, and you want to commit harm against that group, then you're committing a crime, and they do some definitions here. So likely audience being a particular group that you want to do harm to. And the definition of harm is emotional or psychological harm, amounting to at least serious emotional distress. Now, there are, of course, some questions in that. Like, according
I have many questions.
emotional harm, which that could be anything. Like, me insulting you could be emotional harm,
absolutely.
Right? And so this is why we're not out of the woods. This is going to be an endless
telling you
fight.
that your father has died could be serious emotional harm.
Yeah, so
And that might not be something that's wrong,
So there's one piece of context here which I assume he's just unaware of, which is this is actually in relation to a few cases in the UK of something that is quite sick, and I'm not sure how I feel about it. But so what happened, I think it was either Manchester Arena or just a kid had died, and people were setting up fake Twitter and Facebook accounts with images of the dead kid, and then messaging the parents of the dead kid, being like, I'm still alive, mummy, I hate you.
Horrible.
Yeah, sickening stuff.
But I don't think it should be a crime.
So that's
even
that's
then,
the
maybe.
debate. Should that
Yeah.
be a crime or not? So that's
It's just awful.
So that's an example of what they're trying to get at with the
Yeah.
idea of emotional or psychological harm. But as they clarified there, at least serious emotional distress, which gives it a better standard.
I guess.
But again, this is a fight we're going to have to fight forever.
Yeah. I'm not a fan. But anyway, like we were saying, it's some good news on the legal front when it comes to free speech in the United Kingdom. We actually have a legal ruling that we can appeal to, and it's based on our human rights as recognised by the United Nations. So if our own standards for human rights are not enough, then at least someone else's are, even though theirs comes from ours.
No, actually, the United Nations one is kind of a joke internationally. So the
What a shock.
the British tradition is pretty good. I mean,
Yeah.
you can see it enshrined in the Americans.
Yep.
The United Nations one was initially, I believe, proposed by the British in the West,
Yep.
and it was perfect. Everyone
Yep.
has right to freedom of expression. It's not limited. And the Soviet Union disagreed. They were upset about this.
Well, they would be, wouldn't they?
Of course they were. And they argued in the UN, oh, but what about the Nazis? That was their argument, which is, of course, the communists are just it's like, you're the Soviet Union of all people.
Yeah,
And
but what about the kulaks? I mean, the Nazis.
Yeah. Freudian slip.
Yeah.
But there are some caveats within the UN ruling that you can limit it for moral reasons, for health reasons, so on and so forth. So if we're even failing on the UN level, it's pretty bad.
It is pretty bad.